Hello, and welcome to Design Thinking, the Grand Learning Experience, our series 5 of 5 for the virtual online professional development. Again, I'm Heather Hilz-Fitzgerald within the Romoland School District. So for today, we're going to be looking at a pedagogical practice that could definitely enhance our online learning experience. And so, as we begin to transition and navigate through a new way of accessing our learning, we need to begin thinking of ways to engage, motivate, and challenge our learners. And we can do that through the principles of design thinking. Design thinking can be found in many avenues of society, but what is really amazing is when we begin to incorporate it into education and allow our students to be exposed to understanding, researching, brainstorming, and creating solutions for the future. So, a few years back, I attended a tech fair, and one of the sessions I attended focused around design thinking. And the teacher was using a really fun product called Extraordinaires. And you can actually see that over here on the left-hand side. And so from there, I was completely hooked in the way that I could give my students a deeper thinking process when it came to their learning. So from there, I continued to seek out design thinking practices. I found fellow educators that were using it within their own classrooms. I really researched and looked for shared ideas from my professional learning network and continued to research best practices when it came to structuring the process in my own classroom. So now it was just really trying to fine tune what I was already incorporating within my classroom, and then also infusing the standards needed for students to be successful per grade level. And a lot of times I would look into Newsella as my core text for classroom, and I used it as a consistent project-based learning approach. And so now I took it even to that grander level where I could infuse cross-curricular components into the cycle of design thinking, and pretty much I could totally notice that my students were hooked. So on a side note, the Extraordinaires can be found on Amazon. It's not the same set, I don't believe, that I have currently, but it includes character cards that students can go ahead and empathize with, and then eventually brainstorm and ideate as to how they can provide a product for that character. Another really great area of focus to incorporate design thinking would be the sustainable goals. And I've recently been reading Design to Learn, which really takes you through the entire process of how you would go ahead and implement design thinking in your classroom on a daily basis. So those are all really great resources, and they're hyperlinked in the actual slide that you'll have in Google Classroom. So this is just a little example of students previously within my classroom at the end of their design thinking process. And here they're showcasing what they created based on collaborative projects to help support the character that they studied, researched on, analyzed, and then designed something that would be relevant to them. So I'm going to go ahead and just read this quote from Tim Brown. He's the CEO of IDEO, or IDEO, and he states that design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. So design thinking isn't a new term. It is used in many other occupational sectors, but it is a way for teachers to allow students to be able to research out what solutions can be drawn to support an individual or even a situation. And from there, students use their own creativity to brainstorm and design solutions that can be life-changing. And so right here, you'll see this is the simple process of design thinking, where we begin with empathizing with either an individual or a situation. From there, defining by gathering information, identifying the problem and its components. We then have ideating, where this is where our students can either collaborate together or even individually begin to critically think and be creative as to how we could solve that problem. Then this is where we then develop a prototype in the prototype section, and students can build designs. They could write about things. They could record things. They could build things that will help support whatever their problem was defined as. And then finally, going ahead and testing out, is that product something that is relevant, and gathering data and feedback in order to make necessary changes if needed. So some background on this resource that I'm sharing here with everyone is that my own journey of design thinking came about when the school closures first took place. Our coaching team was tasked to put together packets, and we created 9 weeks of packets with subjects ELA, math, science, and social studies. So I really wanted to pinpoint for our social studies component the meaningful standards that each grade level needed. And so I pulled directly from our Common Core social studies standards, as well as looking at our updated history and social science framework. And after pulling lots of different resources from different areas, I then began to think about how could I transition this learning experience for our students to be a little bit more grand, a little bit more engaging and rigorous. And so I wanted to give them opportunities that could tie in literacy and cross-curricular options through social studies and science. And so in that work I generated, I didn't make all of them specifically wrapped around all of the subjects, which in the sense of if you were to do this in your own classroom and you were a multi-subject teacher, that would be a great place to begin to plop in your math and your science consistently. But as we go through this process in some of my examples, you might not see that directly, but it's definitely doable, and I give examples later on in our webinar. And in our Google Classroom within this slide deck, you'll have all of these shared folders, grades, kinder through 8th, and within them, there's about 3 design thinking, I want to call them almost like mini units that will be usable for you all. Feel free to make a copy, modify them to your needs. So I'm going to go through the entire design thinking process and somewhat go ahead and pinpoint what's happening in each of these steps. So the first step of design thinking is to empathize. And ultimately, the first thing that we as educators need to do is hook our students into what we're trying to teach them. So I suggest choosing a meaningful topic. And again, because I really enjoy what Newsela provides for us as educators, I suggest using that as a source for literature based on current topics that will definitely be relevant to your students at this time. Now, I know for our grades TK through about even second grade, you might not find content that is grade level appropriate or even your Lexile levels that connect. So a suggestion is also to pull from ReadWorks, or even looking within your Wonders units and finding nonfiction texts that will be perfect for that age group. And then after that, really igniting a spark by maybe including some type of multimedia, like a video or a whole group opportunity to do a KWL chart. This would be perfectly executed within Google Jamboard, or maybe just give them some type of really eye-opening image that you could then possibly have an in-person discussion on, or you could even have them reflect on Flipgrid. After that, the suggestion is to do a directed close reading. So during the time that you go ahead and have your daily Google Meets, it would be a great opportunity for you to model close reading for your students. And that way they can begin to practice things such as annotation tools, knowing how to take side notes. And so if you can't do it live with them because you feel as if students might not be engaged, or their attention span might be limited at that point, it's also very important that you possibly go ahead and record that on Screencastify prior, and then have them watch it, and then from there you can come back and do a deeper dive of the article if necessary for that second close read. And then obviously what's so great about Newsela specifically is that there's that quiz component. So that is another opportunity for you to grab just a simple reading comprehension CFA on the fly. And then after we're done reading this article together and understanding how to engage in reading through the close reading steps, you're going to go ahead and have the students begin to think about their closing thoughts by generating an empathetic connection to whoever's in the article, and have students begin to discuss what matters to those individuals in the article or the situation. What are the dilemmas, and or what are the key points. And then from there, you can have students write a constructed response. And this would be a great way to then begin incorporate their writing. And obviously, sentence starters or a modeled writing is suggested to be provided for students so that they have an exemplar model. After your empathize, you can also then begin to reach in and dig a little bit deeper when we get into the idea of comprehension strategies. And so here I've also included these models. You have your general Venn diagram, you have a problem and solution diagram, sequence of events, and main idea and details diagram. And so those would be great based on whatever type of comprehension strategies or comprehension skills that you're currently focusing on to dive in deeper with your students. And of course, also your EduProtocols. So your EduProtocols are kind of like those heightened graphic organizers that allow you to be a little bit more creative. You can also collaborate with them, and definitely critical thinking. And you'll notice that in this EduProtocol example up here at the top where it says Number Mania data collection form, there's lots of opportunities for students to make the connections to mathematics, especially when you think about reading articles that are real world scenarios, and a lot of times they provide statistics and data within those articles, and having students pull out that and looking at that as a connection to literature and mathematics. So our second step within the design thinking process is called define. And so this is the step where obviously we're going to need to go back and reread that article, again, focusing on close reading skills. We don't just attack that article one time and then move on from it. We dive in deeper so we can be experts at the information that we're reading. And this could be an opportunity for students either virtually or even, if we are in a traditional setting, this would be an opportunity for students to maybe read as a partnership, or even have students record themselves when they read. I know I had attended some classrooms last year where they were using Dojo for students to read out loud their AR books. You can also use Seesaw, Flipgrid, or Screencastify. So during the define process, this is where students will begin to analyze the information and understand deeply what the problem might be for the people or situation. And this really allows for inferencing to take place. So they're going to have this graphic organizer that will lead them through that defining component. And so once students have answered these stemming questions, they will independently begin to think about what might the people or situations need based on their research. Obviously, for this first time go around with this with your students, especially for your younger kids, this would be something that I would probably do as a whole class, so that we could, you as a teacher can model to them what are the expectations, how to complete this, and then also give opportunities for students to collaborate in real time and be open to others' suggestions, because sometimes when we throw students into these types of experiences that they've never had before, they might need that support. Moving on to our third step within the design thinking process, and this is where students begin to use their creativity. This step also allows them to begin to engage in their critical thinking skills. Again, as I suggested, if you're doing this the first time around, this would be a whole class type of experience. Again, thinking about your Google Meet as a direct instruction, and this would be something that you guys could collaborate on together for generating ideas as to what we could create, such as a product and or some type of a solution to whatever our problem is based on the article we read. And so if you then did this at another point during your school year, you could also then begin to think about breaking up students into small groups or partners, or sometimes you might have students who feel much more comfortable doing it as an individual, as I have in the past. And this is a great place for them to either share ideas or write down their ideas. And there's no wrong answer. They just need to think about what they would provide to their pretty much the person or scenario that's taking place, to help make it a solved issue. After ideating everything they can think of, students could then synthesize the information and then create 3 ideas that hopefully would solve the problem. So you'll notice down here at the bottom, we have 3 little graphic organizer slots for them to go ahead and place in those ideas. But eventually, one of these ideas would need to be narrowed down to just one idea, because our students would then really fine-tune whatever that solution is that they've created. And this could be a great extension activity for students to go ahead and present their 3 ideas and have peer feedback, teacher feedback as to which one probably would be the best route for them to continue their project on. Moving on from ideate is probably the most exciting part of this entire process, and that is the actual prototype. So for the fourth step, this is where you're going to allow students to create a true representation of choice and voice. Students are then being able to design their prototype that will reflect the problems and solutions. So based off of these prototypes here, I really had to take in consideration during our school closures, what are the resources that our students have at home and have access to. So I wanted to give opportunities for not only digital-like prototypes to be created, but I also wanted almost like tactile or drawing-based or building-based type of opportunities as well, just so that we give our students opportunity to feel comfortable in what they're creating. So if you notice here, this is actually our 3rd grade through 8th grade. I could be wrong. It might be 4th grade through 8th grade prototype menu. And so you'll see that these are a little bit more advanced. In our K through 2nd, you'll see that there are less choices for students, and they're a little bit more primary based friendly for them as well. But in these choices that they have, you'll notice we have create a website. Students could record a podcast. They could draw or design an advertisement. They could record a video. They could write a paper. They could draw a blueprint of their prototype and then go ahead and label and give definitions of what the parts are for their design. They could actually build something from things that are within their home, or even Legos. or they could take a narrative spin on it and share how this would actually be relevant in some type of a scenario. I also included another idea because a lot of times our students have such grand ideas themselves. And so if they came to you and asked if they could do something that represented what they wanted to create, I think that would be an awesome way to really provide that voice and choice to your students. Now, the prototype process, I would give a couple days for students to go ahead and have that opportunity to work on that. And then after your prototype is developed and made, this is where we begin to test. So this is the final step that allows for students to step back and review their product, describe their product, and also test to see if it works. This is also a great opportunity for students to present their work with others. And if we're in a virtual setting, that could be possibly during a Google Meet, maybe giving students each a minute to go ahead and share what they had created. And that really does help with presentation skills. Or you could use Screencastify, Flipgrid, Seesaw as a way to record what they are sharing. I suggest Flipgrid in this sense, though, too, because then you'll have the opportunity for students to go back and look at other students' work and then give feedback directly within the Flipgrid. Once they are sharing and they're able to hear the feedback, and then they're able to take a step back to see if the things that they created within this prototype are going to be usable and doable, they're going to then have to narrow down what things went well with the design and possibly what challenges you had with the design. Now, this is a teacher's next steps. Either you would complete this at this moment with this step, or if you would like to continue to the design thinking process, because obviously this would be your first prototype, revisions and then final prototype might be something that really instills in your students how we can be constantly aware of our work, adapting and changing our work so that it's always better. So that being said, we notice that the design thinking process is an extraordinary step-by-step opportunity for students to access lots of different learning styles, especially the 4Cs when we're talking about communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. And I apologize for my dog barking in the background. But we also notice that close reading is definitely going to be something that you see, and obviously comprehension skills, writing skills, presentation skills. So there's no lack of literacy taking place within this process. And also your connection to mathematics. So really being able to connect what math you're currently doing based on your units of study, and possibly crafting mini lessons to the content being explored, creating word problems to reflect the topic, or finally thinking about that structured performance task-like activity, which will connect to the content that you've been exploring. So again, I was excited to share this with you all, and I hope that you all feel that this is something that you possibly can adapt or modify for your own classroom, because I do believe that your students will really enjoy the process. So the next steps are going to be for you to head over to Google Classroom, and you'll notice that we're in session 5 now. And the assignment here is going to be based upon creating your own design thinking lesson plan. So this is an example that I provided for everybody. I based it off of 8th grade ELA and history connection. You'll go ahead and name your lesson here using either Newsela, StudySync, Wonders, or even read works, you can let us know what article you were focusing on. Making a connection to some standards. We have a history framework standard connected here, and then we also have an ELA reading informational standard connected here. Some possible student outcomes, and then these different prompts will be here for you for each of the different steps of the design thinking process, and your responsibility will be to address those prompts here over to the right-hand side. And then this gives you a little bit of insight as to how you in your own classroom will be able to structure a design thinking lesson plan, grand learning experience. And again, I'm sure your students will absolutely enjoy it. Thank you again for joining me. Congratulations on finishing your last webinar, and I will see you later.